Christopher Waddell is a journalism professor at Carleton University, and he's in Ottawa. And Frank Sesno is the director of the School of Media and Public Affairs at George Washington University, and he joins us from Washington. He's also the author of a new book, and there it is, Ask More. He joins us from our Washington bureau. So, Christopher, let's begin with you, sir. Despite Trump's attacks on the New York Times and CNN, both these organizations having banner ratings, what do you make of that?
Well, you know, there is the old adage in the book publishing industry that there's no such thing as a bad review. People are seeing you and people are paying attention. And I think that's what's happening at the moment. And that's good news for all news organizations, because one of the problems they've faced over the last few years is declining audiences. And hopefully for journalism and for the news business, that's going to extend not just to the national news organizations, such as the Washington Post or the New York Times or CNN or the major television networks, but also down into more local media. But for that to happen, we have to see more activity by journalists and lots more work digging at stories.
So, Frank, is this something that media organizations might secretly wish to be, which is targeted by the new president?
Oh, no, I don't think so. I don't think anybody wants to be targeted, but I think everybody wants to be a player. By the way, I hope Chris is right that there's no such thing as a bad book review, because I'll be counting on that. But, you know, I've not seen anything like this. You know, Richard Nixon had his enemies list, and a number of people in the media were on it, but that was a secret list. It was not something that he talked about. There was no Twitter back then, or tweeted about every day. This is very public. This is ongoing. And what it has done is it has allowed those in journalism to say, not only do you need to know to the public, not only do you need to know about what this new unpredictable president is doing, not only is there this sort of mystery and suspense every day as to what he's going to say or do, but some of your most cherished First Amendment rights that you think that you took for granted may now be on the line. And that's how these news organizations are now marketing themselves, and that's how they're staffing and gearing up for the coverage ahead.
He's been called a lot of things, this new president. I think I won't be breaking with journalistic objectivity if I say unpredictable is a fair comment at this point. Frank, let's ask you about this then. How are news organizations responding to that unpredictability?
Very aggressively. So, for example, the New York Times, the Washington Post, NPR, CNN, all of them have added investigative teams. The Washington Post, I think, now has 7 full-time reporters just covering the White House. That's in addition to the coverage of the agencies and Congress and everything else they're doing. If you watch CNN, if you watch Fox, it's virtually all Trump all the time. So they have geared up both in terms of their staffing and in terms of their focus. The better part of the front page of the old traditional front page, the hard copy, today, for example, Sunday, both the Times and the Post is about Trump and politics and all this kind of thing. So this is sort of DEFCON 3 in the United States as far as journalism is concerned, and the audience is responding. The audience is interested. People have mobilized. One of the stories today is on all these congressional members who are being deluged by people to come home to their districts and have town hall meetings so they can yell at them. And so the country is very much on edge, and the one place they go is journalism. New York Times is saying something like journalism, it's never been more important. They don't even have to mention the word Trump. It's just assumed.
Yeah, it's there front and center on their webpage for sure. Well, Christopher, the Huffington Post has a new editor-in-chief. Here's a bit of what she had to say about the direction that she'd like to go in. We'll just quote this here. I see us as fundamentally representing the ordinary people anywhere in the world who feel that the game is rigged, that the deck is stacked against them, who feel that the house always wins. Now, this is an organization that early on in the campaign put Trump on their entertainment pages only. Now it sounds like they're talking a bit like Trump did on the campaign trail. What do you make of their approach?
Well, I think a couple of things, actually. And to follow up on what Frank was saying, in addition to the things he's noted, I think there's been a substantial change in how reporting and how journalism is taking place. In that if you read the stories or watch the television reports, you're now seeing not just reporting what people are saying, but if it's in a text story, you'll see a quote from Mr. Trump or from someone else, and then right afterwards you'll see, more often than not, a statement indicating whether in fact what's being said is factually accurate or is not accurate. There was a really interesting piece on CBS Evening News the other night where this was the day when Senator Jeff Sessions was confirmed as Attorney General. He then launched into a brief statement about crime being a huge problem in the United States and violent crime being the most dangerous time ever. That was immediately followed in the newscast by a graphic and about 40 seconds spent saying that in fact that's not true. Crime has gone down consistently since 1993. There was a slight uptick in 2015, but generally it's been on a huge decline. So we're seeing, I think, reporting in journalism is changing a little bit in that news organizations and reporters are actually indicating what facts are in addition to what statements are being made by the politicians. And as for the Huffington Post, I mean, that's all great, but the best way to do that is actually send reporters out on the ground around the country to listen to people and talk to people. And that would be what I would hope the next stage of what news organizations do. They were criticized significantly for not doing enough of that during the campaign, but get reporters back out in the field, get them away from their desks, get them away from spending their time on their Twitter accounts, and actually going out, listening to people, talking to people, and see what's going on around the country. And if the growth that we're seeing in audiences produces more of that, that would be fabulous. And the other thing I think that's important too is that in fact at the moment, in the last election, only 54% of Americans voted for the president. And so there's a lot of people who didn't vote last time who may be being interested in politics by what's going on and what's being reported. And that would be good for society as well.
Frank says, no, you look like you want to chime in on where this business is headed.
Well, I want to agree with what was just said because I think it's very important. And I think this is one of the reasons that news organizations in the United States have the crisis that they have in terms of public confidence. There is way too much talking about people and not enough talking with people. Right. And there has been way too much horse race and politics throughout all of this. So as the new administration settles in, what journalism needs to be doing, in my view, is really getting out there and saying, okay, you're going to reform health care. Who's that going to affect? How's that going to affect doctors? How's that going to affect hospitals? How do the bills get paid? What conditions will be covered and not covered? You're going to rip up a trade deal, rip up NAFTA? Well, what actually happens with the auto industry when a car is built in Windsor and Detroit and down in Mexico as well? And where does it get assembled and what happens to the jobs? We need much more story by example and hearing from real people to plug this in rather than all these kind of policy pronouncements that become sound bites that people can yell and scream about. So I think that's one thing. The other thing that's very important to recognize is that one gets a sense, and there is some talk about this, that this could be sort of a new spring for journalism. I do think that we may be seeing a purposeful journalism in ways that we haven't seen before. The sense that people are paying attention. The danger, though, is that the country is so polarized now and they have gone to their kind of respective corners that will there be a gathering place where people can get together and agree that this news organization or that is credible enough and these are the facts as we accept them so we can go from there. The polling indicates that there's not room for a lot of optimism on that because, what you see depends upon where you stand and people are standing far apart right now.
Guys, just one more question here. Let's talk a bit about language because we've heard people, including on CNN, use the word, that was a lie. I hear NPR saying that was untrue. As we struggle forward in this new world to try to communicate the stories, how should we phrase what we say? Can we call a lie a lie? Should we call a lie a lie? What is the language going forward? Chris, we'll start with you and then maybe Frank, if you want to jump in.
I don't think there's any problem in calling a lie when it's deliberately done and it's not, and we know that it's actually done for a purpose. And much of what's said from Mr. Trump, in fact, it clearly is said for a purpose and is factually untrue. People make mistakes, that's not a problem, but I don't think much of what Mr. Trump says is actually a mistake. He may believe it, but in fact the facts don't support it. So I don't see any, I think that's part of the change I think that journalism is undergoing, and I agree with Frank that the risk in that is that in a polarized society, each side gets to argue, well, this is my journalism and that's your journalism, and I guess that is a risk because we've lost some of the role that mainstream media used to play as the marketplace of ideas around which things got debated, and we are moving into different camps. But I don't see a problem with actually calling things for what they are. Clearly, on the political side, they're done for a purpose, and they're done to persuade people that black is white or white is black, and I think that's part of journalism's job to tear that apart when it's not true.
We used to refer to the L word as, it was liberal, was somebody going to use it. Now L word is lie. It's very strange times here. I'm very conservative on this. I feel that if a news organization without attribution is going to take it upon itself to say that someone lied, they need to be able to demonstrate intent. And Donald Trump is so fast and loose with the facts, whatever the facts are, that we don't know what's a lie, what's an exaggeration, what's an insistence, what is just an assertion without any background, without any documentation. I had Sean Spicer over to the university 2 weeks ago. He and I were supposed to talk for 15 minutes. We ended up talking for 37 minutes. We didn't agree on much. And all he said after after I asked him about that inaugural assertion that he made was, well, I'm not wearing that suit anymore. I'm wearing a different suit now. They're not going to stop the White House in terms of assaulting fake news, and their definition of fake news is news they don't like or news that is critical, it would seem. Media should absolutely call out inaccuracies, falsehoods, or lies, but the lie word it's a loaded word, and you need to be able to demonstrate intent.